Appreciate your sound, need to bring innovation. Sound needed for innovation.
Music brings us together, even when we're apart. That's why we support Canadian musicians, festivals, and award shows. It's just one of the ways TD's Ready commitment helps build a more inclusive tomorrow.
Atiga Mackenzie, Labrador Miu Govunga. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that this event and the Halifax Pride Festival takes place in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship with the Wabanaki peoples. We recognize that reconciliation requires action in support of words. We commit to working with and supporting Indigenous communities, and it is important that we work towards identifying and uprooting all systems of oppression.
Halifax Pride is dedicated to providing space that is accessible, inclusive, and free from oppression, harassment, and discrimination. In this space, we will treat each other with respect and dignity, regardless of age, race, gender expression, gender identity, sexual orientation, levels of ability, and all of our diverse identities. Halifax Pride stands in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement to end police brutality and violence against Black communities across North America. African Nova Scotians and Black people have the right to live free from oppression, violence, and systemic marginalization. Halifax Pride recognizes our history and ongoing contribution to the marginalization of QT/BIPOC. Since the beginning and to this day, the queer movement remains a protest against systems of oppression, including those that disenfranchise Black, Indigenous, and people of color. As such, Halifax Pride commits to actively operating in a more anti-racist and anti-oppressive framework by prioritizing QT/BIPOC voices and leadership in our spaces. Please visit our website to see some of our ongoing initiatives championing, supporting, and working with QT/BIPOC. Secondly, Halifax Pride commits to holding ourselves accountable and allowing queer individuals to also hold us accountable for our shortcomings. We commit to engaging in discussion and following the leadership of traditionally marginalized and disenfranchised queer individuals. Throughout this year's festival, you may reach out to any one of the board members to provide comments or express concerns that you may have. We have also set up an anonymous survey to provide feedback for all events. Please visit our website to complete the survey. And lastly, Halifax Pride commits to supporting Black, Indigenous, and people of color and their leaders in actions calling on government and organizations to create meaningful change, such as adopting policies that begin to dismantle systems of oppression. This year, Halifax Pride has required that all corporations who wish to participate in Pride to sign an agreement that commits them to supporting QT/BIPOC in several ways. The agreement has been published on our website and is available for public to view.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Noon Hour panel series today, POC Supporting Black Communities. My name is Chris Cochrane. I'm a trans activist here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I will be your moderator for today. Our panelists are Tamim, Geordy, and Rena. So I want to say hello to all three of you. How are y'all doing today?
Hi.
Chris.
Geordy, you have to unmute yourself, hon.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here as your moderator, and I'm also here happy to see such a diverse group. As I said before this all started, that it is great to see other non-Black POCs coming out to support, and I also feel that your communities are also underrepresented, not only just in our queer community, but also in Halifax Pride itself. So I think that Indigenous and Asian and Arab people need to be just as amplified as everyone else, as Halifax Pride this year is about amplifying voices. So therefore, that is it. So I'm going to stop rambling on because this is more about you guys talking, you people talking today about, sorry, I'm Kate Brentner, it comes out of me all the time. You people talking about your experiences and also how you can better help the Black community. So we're going to start off with our first panelist, Tamim Arabi, he, him pronouns, a queer, gay, cis man, Saudi Arabia, sorry, I can't speak today, obviously, that's great, born Syrian Canadian who lived in Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, and moved to Canada 11 years ago. Tamim is a newcomer to the 2S LGBTQIA+ youth coordinator at the YMCA Center for Immigration Programs, where he works towards creating safer, positive spaces and developing programming and services for newcomers for the LGBT community. Tamim's background is in telecommunications and electrical engineering, and his passions extend to technology, global, as well as local politics and human rights. Thank you for being with us, Tamim. This is your time to speak.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, everyone. I'm going to start by saying if you're watching on YouTube, I am in the top center pane. I'm wearing a black shirt. I have white wall background behind me. So thank you everyone for being on for coming to this panel. I am very, very grateful that I have the honor to be among these great panelists here, and with you, Chris, as a moderator. So we're talking today about how non-Black people of color communities can support Black communities, and how we have like internalized, and like in our communities we have so many forms of racism. I'm not going to talk about everything in my opening remarks, because this is going to be an open conversation. But just briefly, like as someone who was born and lived in Saudi Arabia as a non-Saudi citizen, I'm of Syrian origin. I have experienced racism on the daily basis in Saudi Arabia. There is always so many forms of discrimination for not being Saudi. And I would like to say that maybe like racism, we know racism here in this part of the world as it's a very big word that is anti-Black racism is the main form of it. But I would say like in the Arab world, like racism is, I think like Arabs like to be more colorful about their language. Racism is against anyone who is not a citizen of that country that you're in. And just being Syrian, although like I'm an Arab, we see racism there. Like for example, my father has been in Saudi Arabia for almost 50 years now, and he still experiences racism. He can't own land. He can't start a business. So we will talk about this soon, like how the sponsorship system and the kafala system in this part of the world is inherently racist. We like to think that like we abolished slavery in the Arab world, where there's a rich history of slavery in the Arab world. Like we like to think that we have abolished that, but like we can talk about modern day slavery. It's a big thing. It's still happening, and we can't ignore that. And then like if we talk about also like our communities here, the Arab communities in Canada, like when the protests erupted around after the murder of George Floyd, and we can see the movement gaining a lot of momentum here for like gaining civil rights for Black communities in North America. I've witnessed a lot of discussions among Arab communities, either online or offline, where like they like to distance themselves, like as if like anti-Black racism is just a white people problem, a North American problem, that we are like, we don't have that issue in our world. And like that ignorance really hinders us from addressing anti-Black racism in our own communities, either back at home or even here. And I have a lot to talk about, but I will stop at here, and maybe we'll bring more into the discussion as we move forward. Thank you so much, Chris, and thanks for everyone on this panel.
Thank you so much, Tamim, for speaking. I think you bring up a lot of wonderful points, and hopefully we can explore those a little bit more this afternoon. So we're going to talk to our next panelist, Geordy Marshall. Hi, Geordy. How are we doing?
Hi, I'm good.
Fantastic.
How are you?
I'm great. Geordy Marshall is a 29-year-old Eskasoni First Nation, is from the Bear Clan. Geordy is two-spirit and one of the founders of Pride Eskasoni, which I think is fantastic. He serves his community, she serves her community as an executive director for, I'm going to mess this up and I'm so sorry, so I'm going to get you to say it.
Give me the LC.
Thank you. Grassroots Mi'kma'ki Pride organization. Geordy is a two-spirit artist where she expresses her art through drag, as Regina Fierce, as we all seen on Friday, as a singer and a songwriter. Fantastic. I hope we get to hear some of that voice. Maybe not today, but I want to hear some of it.
I think I'll be on the variety show, so check me out.
Fantastic. Well, we'll tune in for that. So, Geordy, this is your time to speak.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. And for description, I'm the one with the blue background and pretty pictures in the back. And I'm wearing glasses, and I'm holding the eagle feather. So I'm just thinking, and I'm thinking about everything that has been said. And I think what's important in the introduction is just to unearth all these topics so we can start sorting through all of them together. And when I think about racism, but I also think about supports and how we're all in this together. And, I'm just thinking about everything that I've known and everything that I've collected. So a lot of everything that's being said, I take and I reflect and see how it applies to me and how I can revert back what ways we can get through this. And I see a lot of, when I look at everything that I see online, especially that's where you see a lot of racism. Like, people have the freedom to talk about what they want to talk about on Twitter or on Facebook, and even on news articles, in the comments of news articles, you see all these, like, where did these people come from, where they just start spreading so much hate into communities that are trying to rise up, trying to be encouraged, trying to celebrate life. And one thing I do have to acknowledge, though, is that for my community, the Mi'kmaq community and the Black community have been in partnership since the Black community's arrival into our territory, into our nation. So it's not just a territory we're in. This is a nation of the Mi'kmaq people. And Canada is built up of multiple nations. This isn't just like one nation for all. We're all multiple nations coexisting together, who represent different set beliefs and values and families, and this is all ingrained. So when we welcomed everyone in, it is known that the Mi'kmaq and the Black community have been supporting one another on their journey. It was very difficult for people to arrive here and to learn how to survive, but we've been doing it for thousands of years. And so the Mi'kmaq way is to always be welcoming, to share support. We say, we're not trying to cause harm onto other people. So even if say if you had an enemy, someone like did some bad things to you, and then down the line in the future you saw them and they were hungry, and you had food, obviously you're going to feed them. That's the way to be. And so having these values translate into how we see the world, how are we all connected? We have the word "umstid." What does that word mean? All my relations. So my relations is recognizing that we all come from the same earth. We may be indigenous to North America, but all of us, no matter what color our skin is or where we come from or our culture or our language, that we're all indigenous to Mother Earth. And that's what's most important to recognize, is that we're all in this together. I wrote a song that's going to be presented tomorrow. It's called Rainbow Nation, and that's what that's all about. That let's celebrate the Rainbow Nation. But that's all that's in my mind right now. So we'll head on over to the next one, the next panelist.
Thank you so much, sweetheart. And I think we can use some of those values throughout the whole world. And yes, definitely a Rainbow Nation. One of the things that I get asked all the time about is why is it that I'm upset about things that are happening in other parts of the world? It's called a community for a reason. So thank you for speaking on that. So our next panelist is Rena. My personal hashtag, They Crush Thursday forever, is a queer, non-binary, second-generation settler who grew up in Kaputchik to parents of Korean and Polish descent. They have worked as a facilitator of community development and social transformation with a focus on youth and social justice for over 15 years, and have performed drag locally for 5. The insight they share to this panel is informed by the generous and gracious wisdom offered by others, especially Black, Indigenous friends and teachers. And interactive and intentional reflection of integration that was a lot of I words, from the own personal and familiar experience of interactions. Thank you, Rena, for being here.
You're welcome.
And actually, Rena's in the room with me. So one of my things is always to make Rena blush because I think they're amazing. And I love it. So Rena, this is your time to speak.
Thanks. Where do you start? So here's another I word, alliteration. I love it. I love words that start with the same letter. Anyway, for those who are home and might need a description, I'm a person of Asian descent. I'm mixed Polish and Korean. I'm wearing a blue shirt with white birds on it, some earrings that say tender and tough on them. I have shoulder length black hair, black background, really beautifully lit thanks to the tech support here in the studio. So I would preface everything that I'm going to say with I'm not an expert. I come to this, and I'm speaking from my own experience as someone who's grown up in Chibuktuk as a mixed race kid. I grew up in the West End of Halifax. All of the learning that I've done has been through self-reflection. I dropped out of university and feel really great about that. And so there's this question I have in my head, and sometimes other people might have, of what, why are you talking on this panel? So just want to preface everything with, I come to this conversation with humility, with lots of openness for feedback to anything that I might say today, particularly feedback from Black and Indigenous folks and other people of color. White folks, if you've got some challenges with what I've said, if you want to talk to me about it, you got to come with all of the grace and patience. So there's that. I want to thank Kate McDonald. Recently, I've been hearing her talk about how coming to these conversations about race and about oppression and about justice, that we have to build braver and safer spaces for people to make mistakes, and that helps me show up in this space and share my experience. So really want to thank Kate for naming that and setting that intention and creating that space for us to have the complicated conversations. And I say that because growing up here, there's no way that I could grow up in Nova Scotia under white supremacy and not grow up as a racist person, like not have experienced racism towards me, but also have grown up with ideas that were racist. I grew up in very mixed schools. I went to Westmount Elementary School, Oxford Junior High, St. Pat's, which is no longer a high school and might date me. But all of those were pretty mixed groups, and I didn't have very many Black friends. My Korean family, I'm pretty disconnected from those roots. I can't speak to the experiences. Also, all Asian people are not the same, so I'm speaking from my experience. So I can't speak a lot to the racism that exists in Asian or Korean communities, other than lots of learning that I've been engaging in about that as I have been prompted. I think the person that comes to mind when I think about this, about decolonizing myself and shifting my perspective, has been my pal Raven Davis, who's also an incredible Indigenous leader, who, when we were having conversations about what is it that folks can do to be supportive, talked about, learn about yourself, learn about your people, learn about the communities that you're in or a part of and how they've perpetuated harmful, oppressive, white supremacist violence and oppression. So I've been on that journey of learning and unlearning. And so I think, folks like Kate, folks like Raven, who have informed me, and my perspective has really been about, or it comes from a place of having done a lot of reflection, critical thinking about what are the messages, what are the thoughts that I have, where do they come from, and how do I operate in this world? Even though I've grown up in a pretty diverse community, inquiring into what are the ways that I perpetuate harm, thinking about the places where I have power, the spaces that I inhabit when I'm in a group of people, when I have a microphone, what are the ways that I can use those spaces and the power that I have and the resources that I've been able to have access to elevate Black and Brown voices, while also understanding where I come from and what I have connection to. I think that's where I would start. Oh, I think there's a note too about what's interesting for me as a person of Korean descent, is that I've never been to Korea. It feels very distant and like a thing that I can't do because I'm mixed race and because I don't speak the language, and that's in part because of white supremacy and colonialism, that the people that I know, most of the people that I know and have relationships with who have been to Korea and who can speak to experiences of racism and xenophobia in Korea, most of those folks are white folks who went there to teach English after university to pay off their student debt. I don't have an experience of what it's like in Korea. And what I've heard from white people is that in Korea, it's pretty xenophobic. So that's an interesting thing to think about for white folks who travel abroad and experience some kind of racism towards them, and what they bring back to someone of Korean descent and saying, oh yeah, it's pretty xenophobic there. Like, well, that's interesting for you to have had that experience. So.
Thank you so much, Rena, for talking. We just got a comment from Heather saying, so many amazing folks here. Thank you for sharing your voices today. And I want to amplify that and say thank you for sharing your voices today. This panel is about how non-Black POCs can help our Black community, but we have to remember about the intersectionality of what is going on, whether it be a Syrian refugee or whether it be a person talking about the Indigenous women that are being killed in record numbers, or whether it be someone from Asian descent having to explain that different Asians are not all the same. And, unfortunately, because of people and with the pandemic that is happening, I've seen it myself where people distance themselves away from Asian people because they think, COVID is going to happen if I go near these people. And I think that's kind of disturbing myself. So as a POC person who is a Black individual, I want to say thank you very much for being here and speaking with us today. And also I want to say your voices do matter. And the reason you're here on this panel is obviously amplifying and showing that there is more to this community than just some old scary white man in a closet, So we are going to go on with some of the questions, and I'm going to start off with one of my questions. How do you think within your own intersectionality of your community, you can help to amplify Black voices, Black trans voices, and how do you think you personally can help? Who wants to go first?
I can go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you, Chris. It was really great listening to both of you, Rena and Geordy. Again, as Rena said, I am also not an expert. I'm bringing my own personal experiences. And so to your question, I think we, as I said earlier, we shouldn't be distancing ourselves from the racism that is happening in our own communities and in larger communities that are not our own. And I think we should always have to show up. We should always have to show up. But we can't show up if we don't recognize the racism that is already existing. So for us to be blind about what's happening in our own communities and in other communities, we're not gonna be able to support Black communities. So we have to recognize what's happening and we have to work towards changing that. There's a lot of us that we grew up making a lot of jokes about Sudanese people who are, Sudan is an Arab country, but majority of them are Black. And this is an African country that we just make jokes right and left about them. And to this day, we need to recognize, we need to call people out in our own families, in our own gatherings, our own friends, even in communities here where I see a lot of Syrian youth, sometimes they're using the N-word with their friends and they think it's okay. These small acts, they should be called out or called in. We should recognize that. Yeah, so that's the least we can do, and we should show up. We should show solidarity when we're seeing all these protests happening. We shouldn't just sit back on our couch and say this is not our problem. It is, as you said, Chris, intersectionality plays a big role here because oppression of one is oppression of all. So yeah.
Exactly. We can't expect to be calling out other people with outside of our community if we're not going to call on the people that are inside of our community. So allyship means allyship. So does Rena or Geordy, do you have an answer for that question?
We're going to go into the order of how we were introduced.
You can do it, whoever wants to speak.
Okay. I'm just thinking about, there's many ways, and I think one of the biggest issues that we have in this world is that we're so disconnected, and those are the effects of colonization, and that it's all individualistic, non-community based, family related, and we see reflections of community based, collective based thinking in these diverse cultures. We see it throughout the whole world, and I can speak about it in the Mi'kmaq sense, where I can look at my cousins or my aunts, in the colonial perspective. Oh, that's my extended family. No, they're not. They're my family. They're my people. They're my folks. They're the people that love and support me, and I know no matter what. My first cousin lives across the street. She needed anything, I'm right there. It's So through this way, we don't separate from our family. We continue to go even further from who we're related to and an outside, and have these people come in. How are we interconnected? And so when I think about this is how we can look at one another as multiple and diverse cultures, and to approach one another with love and arms, invite each other to our circles. How can we become family, as a nation, as multiple nations, as multiple diverse cultures? And I think about, inclusion is part of that. Inclusion and, inviting people into your circles. And, it's on a social level. This is on a professional level. This speaks on all levels of how we operate in our daily life. And I had something else on my mind, but it's gone. So I guess I'll speak about it another time. But I think that's what's most important. It's just inclusion, and also and the other thing is to be intolerant to racism and racist remarks that, sometimes people don't even know they're being racist. These things are such ingrained into how society works today. And that, if you know right from wrong in terms of racism, then it is your responsibility to correct that person who doesn't know through their ignorance, and to facilitate a safe space for them to say, you're being ignorant right now and you're being racist. Are you going to take the responsibility of that and to change that within yourself? And if not, then that then changes from ignorance to blatant racism, which is not tolerable at all. So I guess that's all I have to say for now.
I definitely resound that, Geordy. I always say that it's one thing to fight racism when I'm around, but it's another thing to fight racism when I'm not around. So, you have to do it, put your work in 24/7. I put my work in 24/7. I don't get to take this off when we go home. So why should you? So Rena, do you have any answers that you want to? You want to give?
Yeah, and the first thing that comes to mind is I heard Derico Simmons the other night at the march say, at the rally before the march, say, when people ask him, what can I do? He says, well, what do you do? And I think what I just heard with what Geordy was saying is thinking about the relationships that you're in. What are the positions that you're in? So examining who you are, what are the spaces you're in? For me, as a facilitator who teaches other people how to hold space, who teaches people about how to include young people, how to amplify young people, when I go into those spaces, I've done background work to try and ground myself before I go there in who I am and what I might be faced with, so that I can say the tougher things, so I can ask people who are holding spaces for young people, oh yeah, and so what have you done to ensure that young Black folks feel comfortable there? Are you asking, and I know, and these are questions that have been asked of me, what do I do when I'm holding space for young people to come and share their wisdom? Well, how am I amplifying young Black folks if I haven't built relationships of trust with them, if I haven't ensured that the people that they trust are in the room and have their backs, and that their community is behind them and can support them with whatever happens, and that I can support them with what's happening? How have I built relationships of trust? So that all for me encapsulates I listen first to what Black folks are saying they need. I build relationships so that I'm in a position to hear what folks need. I pay attention. I'm doing as much reading as I can. I've done I've been doing. I'm not done. I'm constantly doing the work of decolonizing myself, understanding who my people are, doing the work to ground myself so that if I do get called out for stuff, that I don't run away and that I can be there and listen and learn and do better. I think those are pretty critical. And so then I can take the learning and the listening to what's actually needed into the spaces I have access to. I can use the privileges that I've had access to, and that I've been able, the spaces that I've been able to be in, the audiences I've been able to hold, so that I can bring those lessons forward. So I can be an advocate when it's harder for Black folks to be in the room, or when I know that I'm in a space with other Black folks, when I'm in a space with Black folks and I am tuned into the kind of microaggressions or the kind of violence that's being perpetuated, that I can check in with them about how they're feeling and do they need me to be an advocate in their space? Is there anything I can do to support them to have their voices heard, or do they need me to speak in that place? And it's really nuanced. It takes, I think, a lot of grace, a lot of humility, constant learning and grounding, and also knowing that sometimes I can't do it. Sometimes I can't show up. And if I'm not in the position, if I'm too unstable, if there's too much going on, if I am going to do harm because I'm not prepared to be in those spaces, then not to step into that role. Like, just to sort of know your role, I guess, in a way. Yeah.
And live it.
Yeah. So.
That's fantastic. And that's exactly what I think this kind of leads into our next question. These questions are coming from mostly me right now. But in this post-current pandemic life, we are using a lot of social media because this is how we are communicating, because we can't be as close as we used to be. Unfortunately, social media is a double-edged sword, especially when it comes to QT BIPOC people, with hashtags. And when I teach my education classes, I always say, people always say we were bullied. But, when I was a kid, if somebody took a picture of you, they had to go to Walmart, get it developed, bring it back to school, hope that it went around the school before everybody got to see it and got destroyed. Now I can take a picture of you and some person over in another country can just be on you at that. So with that, how do you think that social media can be used for good, and also how do you think social media is also harming the current state that we're in? Because I see with the news, definitely media, they like to only sensationalize the horrible things that are going on in our community, but when positive things and positive change actually happens, it's not flashy enough for them. So how do you think social media can help, and how does it harm? This time, I'm going to start with Geordy. Geordy, do you want to go first with this?
Hi. I think what's most important right now, and just by following the our Artists Matter show, is that we need to have more visibility in the Black community in the media, and to represent them and to lift them up, and to, just to have that visibility of celebrating the beautiful art that can be created and has always been created by the Black community, and to just really support all of our artists in that way. Support the Black community artists, support the BIPOC community, the Indigenous and people of color community, in their journey of their artisthood. And through that, it's that through that visibility over time that it normalizes. We see this in the media where where there's the tokenhood of there's that one Black guy in the movie, just to say that we're inclusive, but where's the leadership, where's the leading roles to support these underrepresented communities, and to normalize that, so it's not just the whole game of of whitehood to get all the benefits and all of the spotlight. So it's time to share that spotlight, and to really through that leadership, through that representation, what's important is that there will be a whole new generation that will follow that leadership but we need those who are in power to recognize that and to do something about it, to say, let's normalize this diversity, and let's encourage it. This is a whole new way of living. This is a new dawn of how we experience social media, how we experience any type of media. so that we can, for, you know, it may not be an imminent change in terms of how people change their perspective of diverse cultures, but and over time, we will hope that, you know, in the next generations to come, that this will be normal, this will be okay, this will become a step closer to where we're supposed to go. And in terms of the downfall of social media, and I mean, we see in popular culture that whole movement of canceling people, and I think people can be quick to judge and be very dismissive of what's important. So it's always like this whole opposition of, you know, if there's a Black Lives Matter movement rising up, and they're highlighting these important people who are underrepresented and those who haven't sought justice yet. But there's also this whole other equally huge amount of people who are finding and looking and trying to search ways to devalidate what's going on, trying to devalidate what is needed within our communities, so that they can say, okay, if there's that one thing that's wrong with them, then it completely removes what's important. And through those illusions, people not seeing the truth of what's going on, then that's what's detrimental to this whole movement and should not be highlighted at all. You know, so we can move forward, we can push on, like, oh yeah, whatever, enjoy your land of delusion. We're here and this is what's important. And we're not gonna change, we're not gonna move. There's a word in Mi'kmaq that says milkabugui, means I am standing strong. I am standing strong as a person. Amukabugukti is we are all standing strong together. So that's what's important. Whether that's what we need to do. That is our responsibility as Indigenous and people of color to support the Black community, that we're standing with them and beside them, so that every step of the way that they're supported, and that when everyone on this earth realizes that Black lives actually do matter, all Black lives matter, that we can now move forward towards what's healing and to bring peace into our nation.
Fantastic. Tamim, Rena, do you have an answer for the question?
Yeah, I can weigh in with just a few comments, and I do want to echo what Geordy said about social media, about being careful not to fall into like following a trend without actually like reading and knowing about like what's going on. But I also want to say that like I am sick of empty notions of solidarity. I'm sick of, and we've seen this, social media amplifies and accelerates these trends. Like we've seen like a lot of organizations, institutions that are showing some void statements of solidarity, and then a few days later they're supporting racist organizations, supporting the other message. So social media is great, it's a tool, but if we're using it just to polish our image, then there's no point of using it at all. I think we can use social media to champion, as you said, Chris, good people in our communities, people doing the work. I'm also tired of being, it's easy for all of us to be shocked into action, like we have seen in the recent murders, or like recently we've seen Sarah Higazi's death. Like it's easy for us to be shocked into action, into solidarity, but it's harder for us to put the work when there is no element of shock. So that's what we need to do. We need to actually put the effort, because if you're not putting the effort, then you're doing the easy part, and we can all do the easy part. We need to put the effort into actually supporting people without waiting for tragedies to happen, for these incidents to happen. I just want to say something as well, like about social media, like we need to use social media in the Arab world. Like as recent as 2 years ago, there was this famous singer who threw out an entire music video. She put blackface. She dressed up as a Nubian lady, which is the area from South Egypt, North Sudan, Black community, and she just dressed up as one of them and like did a blackface. And to us here in North America, we saw that, like, we know how bad that is, but like in the Arab world, a lot of people don't know that how offensive, how oppressive, how this brings a lot of like oppressive, discriminatory history against Black people. And we need to use social media to bring awareness to our own communities and talk about it.
Thank you. Rena, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would add, for me, social media is about access. In a positive light, social media can be about access. So one of the things that's happened for me is being able to curate my feed. So purposefully seeking out who are some thought leaders, who are the people on the ground, what are the organizations doing the work, so that I can be tuned into what's happening and what's real. Being active about, okay, if there's a community of folks who are organizing and they're asking allies to do things, what are the ways that I can do that? Taking a moment, a pause to not be immediately reactive and do some digging about, okay, who's asking for this? Where is it coming from? Is it white folks who are predominantly retweeting or sharing this? Or is it, what is it grounded in? So taking a moment to do that. But being able to curate my feed over time gives me access to perspectives to witness and to learn from first voice that I might not have access to in my everyday life. So in that way, social media, helps me inform myself and my actions and the learning that I'm doing. It also has helped me greatly connect with other Asian people of Asian descent, East Asian descent. Being able, like, there are very few queer Asian folks in Chibuktuk, but I got invited by one of them locally to a page full, like a Facebook group full of queer and trans people of Asian descent, and the conversations that are happening there are really interesting. So engaging in those conversations, the resources that are being shared there specifically about that perspective help me show up here and be able to talk a little bit about it. It informs that part of my decolonizing myself and understanding the roots of the place that I'm from, the ideas that I'm from. And it also allows me to, as well, to think about, well, if I don't have a large following on any social media platform, but the people who are following me sometimes are young people who've been in programs with me. And so I think about social media as a platform where I can support amplifying Black and Brown voices. So people who might not typically have access or have that come up in their feed, they do. And they then see that and are exposed to some different perspectives. So
I believe that, social media, like I said, it's kind of a double-edged sword, definitely. And I also, Geordy, I don't believe in cancel culture. I really don't. I think it kind of just shuts people down. I do believe in calling a person out culture, though. Giving people, telling them, being very blunt and saying, this is how you have come off, this is what you've done, this is how you affected me, and now hopefully you educate yourself. That way, you're getting your voice out, and now it's in the ball is in their court, and they get to now, educate. Morgan Manser would like to say, it's great to hear these important perspectives, and I believe that. It's great to hear from everyone. We are trying to amplify voices. That means all of our communities' voices. Centric on QT BIPOC communities, I usually get calls from different other organizations and other prides and how we can better help. I don't mind giving the education, but you also have to remember to educate yourself. As Rena has said, most of everything that they have learned through their decolonization is from other people.
Yeah.
I do this all the time, and I don't even know that I do. I didn't even know that I did it unconsciously, but every time I enter a room, I'm always asking, where are the other POCs in this room? And unfortunately, I'm sometimes that only POC in that room. I come from a very small town called Glace Bay, which we do have a diverse people down there, but out of a school of almost 1,000 students, I was the one of only 2 Black people. And I don't mean just students, I mean only 2 Black people, and there was one Indigenous teacher. That was it. So it's very different. It's very hard sometimes to be that one voice because you have to kind of speak for a whole culture. But again, we're only speaking from our own perspectives. I can only see from my own eyes and from my own perspective. I can talk on other people's experiences, but I myself cannot speak for those experiences. So it's great to have these panels like this to understand that. So I think my last question is going to be, where do you see us going from here with helping to not just amplify Black individuals' voices, but how do we help to amplify other people's voices and bring this community back together? Because I feel like right now we're still very much in little sections, and I think we need to bring that community back together and stop looking for our differences and start looking for our for the things that we have in common, so that we can grow and build upon that, and also learn some of the differences. I used to love when I was in the Navy that I used to go to different places and learn their culture and eat their food, because it was amazing. There's a difference between appreciating a culture and taking from that culture. So I guess I'm going to stop rambling, and I'm going to just ask, where do you see this kind of leading to?
You know,
I
do you
guess
want to
it's for
start?
anybody who wants to start.
Since we all went first, Rena started.
You want me to go first?
Yes, Rena.
I don't know that I'm ready. I mean, the question is hard. The like, where do we go from here? Because what even is here? We're in the middle, and we're constantly in the middle of change. So I mean, what have I said? Listen to the voices of the people who are having those experiences. I think there needs to be a continued push for, and for folks who are in positions of power to make space for, if we're talking about Black Lives Matter, for Black folks to be leading and to have not just influence, but have real power within those organizations, for white folks and for non-Black people of color to continue to do the unlearning, to be engaging in conversations with each other. I hear you saying like not looking for our differences, but looking for our way together. But I think there's something really critical about spaces that are just for people of color. And also for me, I'm looking for conversations with other people of Asian descent so that we can strategize together about, I'm thinking again about what Dereko said about, what can I do? Well, what do you do? And I extend that to who am I and what are the spheres of influence that I have. So it's just imperative for everyone to be thinking critically about what are your spheres of influence, who are you listening to, be in conversations with people like you to unpack that stuff, listen deeply to the voices of those who are most impacted by the oppressive structures, by the violent structures that are perpetuating harm against Black folks. I think folks who are not Black and not Indigenous need to be on the front lines in a way that's like not leading, but playing like the role of intervening when police come in. So putting ourselves in the line of danger so that Black and Indigenous folks can do the work that they need to be doing and to have some respite. One of the things that like an organization that I'm affiliated with, the Tadamagar Center, is offering space to Black and Indigenous leaders to rest. Like, what are the ways that non-Black, non-Indigenous people of color can take on some of the labor? It's to create space for like Black folks to just live, to just have joy and to not have to be doing, like Chris, you said it, you don't get to take off your Blackness at the end of the day. You take that home, you live this experience all the time. What are the ways that I can create space for you to have some relief from white supremacy? So that's the like, yeah, what are the ways that we can do that in any of the places that we have access to power?
Fantastic. Tamim and Geordy?
Yeah, a lot of the things that you said, Rena, I couldn't have said it better. Really, like, we need to have our own internal dialogues in our own communities. Like, we can't, as I said, like, we can't be there and support our Black siblings if we don't recognize the harm that we have done to them and like that is being done to them. So internal dialogues and showing up. We can't just sit back and watch all these things unfold in front of our eyes and say this is not our fight. Because if it's not our fight now, then when you're being oppressed, nobody's going to show up for you. And I don't, yes, there's a selfish part of it, but like we need to all show up in solidarity with each other, because as we all know, like no one's free until everyone is free. And when we bring the intersectionality of being a person of color and being and with Black, and also like with being queer, there's so much to think about, and like to we can't just ignore any of these things. So, and also I think it's very important that us non-Black people of color to know our space in society. Like we all, we're not all like 0 or 1. We're not all like either privileged or oppressed. We have certain amounts of privileges that some of us don't have and some of us have. So like we should know where we stand in society and use that little amounts of privilege. That, for example, like a lot of the Arab people have fair skin. Like I might be walking into the room and I get that I pass as a white person by just the color of my skin. And I should be aware of that. I should recognize that this is a privilege that I didn't choose to have, but I should use that to empower voices that don't have that privilege. And I can't just sleep on it and think like, yeah, that's a great thing that I have, and I'm just gonna like abuse that privilege. So we should be aware of like us passing. A lot of Arab people have that, and they don't use it to benefit people who don't. Yeah, a lot of internal dialogues need to happen, and in our own communities.
And Geordy, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I'm just thinking. There's lots to think about. Thank you so much, Rena, and thank you so much, Amin, for your words. They're very insightful. And I'm just thinking about, how do we encompass all of this for the future? And there's, like as Tamim said, there's a lot of internal things that we have to work on, but also into the community of how we can facilitate that space to build relations, but also facilitate a space for the truth and reconciliation between diverse cultures. To say, let's put everything into the forefront and set aside our differences and bury the hatchet, so we can then now move forward into a new journey for us all, united, not separated, united. We are BIPOC folks. We are BIPOC people. So we're through that unity, we can then spearhead any direction that we want to go, to ensure that there's no tolerance for ignorance, no tolerance for racism, but also through our leadership to really be consultants to those who are not Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and are in power and are in leadership and are very open to change and to facilitate space and change for diverse races, for diverse cultures. So then we can then do that groundwork to work together to build a new way, to build a new ways of living our lives. This is a whole cultural reform that we can do within our nation. And I think that's what's important. And even within our own queer and trans, even for the QT BIPOC, in our own, the LGBTQ plus community, on how we can facilitate that change within our own community, within their biases, within within racism. Like that's something that needs to be discussed on. Like why is these preferences in the whole world of gender and sexual expression, not so much gender but sexual expression, why is there discrimination in our communities in that lens? Why is it like, oh yeah, there's different ways of people saying, oh yeah, this is my preference. No, I'm not interested in you because you're Indigenous. I'm not interested in you because you're Black. I'm not interested in you because you're a diverse culture. And through these discriminations, how is that connection? How is that unity? And so uncovering these pretty You know, these are not pretty sights. These are not things that we're mostly proud of as a collective, but it's important to uncover them, to uncover and unearth everything, and to really discern as a community on what shall we keep, what's important, where our actions come towards love and unity, and what don't we need. What is it that we inherited through colonialism, so that we can move forward with nothing that's all in the past, and that for us and for our future generations will have a much easier time coming together. But it's important to do that groundwork, and that groundwork has to start today, because if we don't do it, if we continue to pass the buck, say, oh yeah, we'll do that another time, it's not gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen, sis. So let's get together and like really do that work. We're gonna have to lift up our sleeves. We're gonna have to get our hands dirty. We're gonna cry. We're gonna scream at each other, whatever. As long as we get the work done and we work together and everyone is represented. You know, there's a Mi'kmaq and all pan-Indigenous 7 sacred teachings. It's courage, respect, there's humility, there's love, there's honesty, there's truth. And when you encompass all of that, you gain wisdom. And that is the path of an elder. That's the path that every person must take in their life in order to continue that cycle. You know, you start from a child to a youth, to adulthood, to elderhood. And through that cycle, the elder is in charge of leading that generations behind them, to show them the way. So there will be a day where all of us will be elders. We'll be the elderberries marching, and you know, they'll be pushing us on that street, but we will then be in charge of showing them how it is, because it is them that's going to lead us and everyone else as well. So we must break all the old cycles and create a new cycle, and have no tolerance of, you know, going back. Let's go, oh, this is easier, I'm comfortable. No, I don't care if you're comfortable or uncomfortable. There's a huge underrepresented community that's uncomfortable, and it's about time that we are invited to that circle with you, but it's on our terms. And please help us. Please be with us, stand with us, fight with us, love us, understand us, and we will do the same with you. So it's time that we move towards, you know, forgiveness, abiksik tadink, and anyapsink. Anyapsink means to make things right. And that is the action that you do after forgiveness has been established.
Yeah, I think within our own self, we have to remember that we're not all perfect and we do make mistakes. It's what you do after that that's going to help. And I think that being a queer trans person, and sometimes referred to as an elder, I don't really think of myself as that, but maybe. I think this is one of the first times I've ever, we love our acronyms in our 2S LGBTQIA plus community, but this is the first time I've actually felt like I was in a QT BIPOC centric space, because we're now representing the community as a whole. There is definitely some other people, like Kate McDonald said on Monday, that there was lack of an Indigenous presence within our thing. And she called herself out. And I think we have to be ready to be able to call ourselves out. And then also, if somebody does call ourselves out, take a beat. Remember, you know what? It might not be personal. They're just educating you. Take a beat. Remember, you might not be, like one of my friends said to me years ago, that I might not be the Beyonce, but I might be the closest thing that to people that Beyonce will get to. So make sure you have humility, you respect, you love, you say thank you, and you listen. Because if you are just waiting for somebody to stop talking so that you can give your point across, then you're not having a conversation. All you're doing is talking at each other, and that's just going to stop it right there. So we are coming to the close of our panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave the floor open to our three panelists. And do you have any lasting words? And also from Morgan, any other have any other recommendations for great resources within, I know it's up to other people to, do the research, but if you have any recommendations or any resources that you think are fantastic, like Game Changer 902, our ambassador this year, can you please go ahead and say that? So I'm going to leave it open to whoever wants to speak first. Go ahead, Tamim.
Thank you, Chris. I wanted to interject on Geordy's comment that change is happening, and we all know the saying that the arc of universal morality is very long, but it bends towards justice. So it's upon us. It's our choice to whether be on the good side of history or the wrong side of history. So change is going to happen. Progress is happening. It's each one of us. Where do we want to be? What are we leaving when we leave this earth? Like, what are we leaving as a mark? What did you do? What did you do to support your POC communities? For a resource, I talked very briefly about the kafala system in the Arab world, where people from East Asia and African country are being brought to Arab countries to work as domestic workers, as laborers, and it's documented that these practices are entrenched in racism and discrimination and oppression, and these people are being underpaid, overworked. Their freedom is being withheld from them. So there is a lot of good resources that of groups that are working towards dismantling these systems. If anyone is interested, I would refer them to a group called Anti-Racism Movement Lebanon, or armlebanon.org. There's another group called Migrant Rights, migrant-rights.org. They're also doing a lot of campaigns to eradicate all these forms of racism in the Arab world, and I will write them down here in the comments. Maybe someone can share them on the YouTube stream. And thank you so much, everyone, for inviting me actually to be on this panel. I'm honored to be alongside these great personalities. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here, Tamim. Geordy, Rena, any last thoughts and resources?
Resources, I would point people to the Game Changers 902 Instagram. They've been posting great resources as I think start and end points, but from there, just look at what they shared and then follow those people and then follow those people. Look, there's lots of stuff out there, and start with the Pride ambassadors who are local. And so far as last words, I just encourage people to, what Geordy just shared, teachings of the Mi'kmaq people, the 7 sacred teachings, everything that Geordy just said, I was just I just wanted to be yes, yes, yes. So when this ends, forget listening to me and just rewind and listen to what Geordy just said. Again, listen deeply again.
And then Geordy, any last words or resources?
I think what's important is that for whoever you are, if you're from the BIPOC community or if you're an ally, you're loved and you're appreciated, you are seen, you are heard. And what's important is that in our journey to look at our personal reflection of ourselves, and have light that little fire to so you don't get comfortable enough, but also don't be hard on yourself. You can be hard on yourself, but don't be too hard on yourself and beat yourself up for your own ignorances, so that we can facilitate a change in a positive way, to change our attitudes, to change our behavior, to change our connections within the community. Say, oh, you know what? If you look at a child and they say something wrong, I don't know if you can say bad words on here, but if a child says, call someone a B word, you're don't call someone a B word. What's the matter with you? And the child will be oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know I was doing something wrong. So have that same compassion as you would a child to yourself in terms of relations, so that we can then move forward in a positive way. That, compassion is very important to ourselves, towards one another, that we can see things and resolve things with love. And, it's very difficult to do that in this social climate that we're living in. Especially compassion towards other people, especially when we're dealing with blatant racism. But I think what's most important is that, if you're coming from genuinity, if you're genuine and you're following those sacred teachings, that there's most definitely room for compassion towards yourself and towards others. So, and through that lens, we can really move forward in such a loving way. And, you know, my vision in the future is that I wake up, my neighbor, and they're all different. They come from all different cultures and backgrounds. No separation. We're all together. We're existing together. And I think that's what's important, to celebrate one another. And, you know, we're all different, and we may not understand people because they're different, but appreciate that difference, appreciate that learning opportunity. And, you know, I love learning about different cultures. I love learning about, you know, I know I can speak forever, but I'm going to just end on this one. One time I was at CBU and we're with friends, and you know, one of my friends was dating someone from Saudi Arabia. And so we went over to their home. They're having this little get together. And so it was amongst family and friends and children and students. And so there was us Mi'kmaq people, and there were some non-Indigenous people, and there were the people from Saudi Arabia coming together. And what they did was they shared us their traditional feast, which was kapsa. And we sat there on the floor, and we had the chicken, and we had the rice, and we were eating with our hands. And like, I sat there and I was so emotional, because like, this is so beautiful to experience this moment with this family. And through that, through experiencing one another, inviting people to your circle, that is where you really truly make a difference on how we treat one another, no matter what your race or cultural background is that sit there, be humble, love, you know, be brave to do that. Be brave to sit there and understand one another. Be honest, express yourself, and understand what the truth is. Dissolve any illusions of what you may have had with different diverse cultures and races. So then you get that wisdom. You honestly do. So I thank you all for being here today, and I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Geordy. I think you're wise beyond your years. I always say to people, you know, not everybody learns the same way. You know, each one teach one, as Kate always says. But find a way that you can appreciate other cultures through it. Food. I'm a foodie. I love eating. So I will definitely, if you want to cook for me, less I have to do. So yes. And if you want me to cook for you, fantastic. If it's through art, if it's through panels like this, find your way in so that you can understand other cultures. Do your exploring. I know it's kind of rough right now because we can't really move around, but there's ways, like right now, social media, Googling, watching panels, watching films, watching movies, watching children play, you know, letting yourself to be delved into another culture, not to take away from that, but also to appreciate that. It's kind of like, you know, when you go to the forest, the only thing that you should leave is footprints. It's like that with other cultures. The only thing that you should be doing is taking away education and not taking away the aspect of the culture that you're trying to learn from. Tamim, the armband, oh my God, armbandon.org, and also the migrant-rights.org. Also, you can check out Game Changers 902, our ambassadors, on the Halifax Pride website. I want to say thank you to Tamim. I want to say thank you to Geordy. I want to say thank you to Rena. And I also want to say thank you to Anissa, our ASL interpreter for today. Thank you for joining us here for this evening discussion. And I hope this goes on beyond this. You know, it's great to have these noon hour panels, but this is just a starting point. We need to move past this, and we need to understand that. And also make sure you're checking out the Halifax website for different things. Tonight is going to be the trans and non-binary hangout. I will definitely be there in all my queerness. So thank you again. I love to all of you, love to all the panel, to the tech group that's here, and also to you for tuning in and listening to a different perspective on how we can better help our Black and also Indigenous communities. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful summer and a wonderful Pride. Keep safe and keep loved.